I want to welcome to the show Garland Gilchrist. He is the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Michigan. Lieutenant Governor, good to see you. This is your hometown, by the way. As our camera looks at you, you were born, you were telling me, just a few blocks, you grew up just a few blocks back from here. This is a beautiful state. It's got a lot of issues to face, but this is a new one. When you were booked on my show, we didn't know this was happening. You have actually seen these protesters at the state capitol. That's where you work.
Absolutely, Ali. Thank you for coming here to Michigan and coming here to speak about this important issue. I saw two of these armed terrorists, these gang members, with my own eyes in the gallery of the Michigan Capitol with semi-automatic weapons months ago. It speaks to the
With semi-automatic weapons in the gallery of the Capitol?
Yes, because Michigan is one of only two states where you can actually bring guns into a state capitol. And the only reason you bring a semi-automatic weapon into a lawmaking institution is to intimidate lawmakers or worse. And that is exactly what they plan to do, to take hostages, to recruit 200 people to come and storm the Capitol and put the lives of lawmakers, but not just the lawmakers, of the children who come to the Michigan State Capitol to learn about their government, like I did as a 7-year-old, every single day. So they are so reckless and dangerous, and this cannot be tolerated, and it starts at the top with the President of the United States.
One of my panelists compared this to violent protests of the social justice movement, in fact, mentioning Antifa. And we haven't really seen pictures of anybody identified with Antifa with militarized and with those weapons. How do you distinguish that for people? How do we make clear what we believe protest is versus these militias, which have a very different flavor to them?
One group of people who have been calling for justice and equity and inclusion want the government to serve them better. Another group of people wants to blow up the government, wants to kidnap and murder the governor, wants to put lawmakers in danger. And one group of people has been enabled by the president and in the Michigan Republican Party, the leadership, who, while they were in the Capitol with guns, went and met with them, fraternized with them, legitimized these organizations. That is dangerous and cannot be tolerated. And instead, those of us calling for justice, we will always do that and be part of the democratic process, not try to disrupt it.
Lieutenant Governor, when you look around countries that struggle with maintaining order, the idea of armed bands roaming around, anti-government bands, must be one of the most destabilizing forces in the world. I would think if I were the Attorney General of America, this has got to be within my top 3 or 5 things. The Attorney General you saw in that testimony did not seem to be aware of the fact that there are militias in Michigan and that they pose an actual threat. What do we actually have to think about it this week? Because this week, for the first time, a lot of Americans are realizing these aren't gun clubs. They're something more serious.
Well, the Attorney General of the United States should take a cue from the Attorney General of the state of Michigan, who, when she was aware of these threats and how real they were, she took them seriously. There are state charges on here in addition to the federal charges, because at every level of government, at every level of society, we need to reject these notions of hatred and violence. And that's what our administration has been about. The reason they wanted to do this to Gretchen Whitmer is because we have been fighting for people. We've been working to keep people safe. One of those guys was upset because he couldn't go to the gym. So instead, he wanted to murder someone. That is not what we should be about in Michigan or in the country. We're not going to let fear stop us. We're going to continue to work, to govern, to protect people. I led a march of 200 people to go vote in Detroit yesterday in response, in part, to this kind of notion. Democracy can defeat these destructive people.
All right, we still have coronavirus. These militias had some beef. I don't know. They said it was a liberty issue, but in fact, they are anti-government. But the bottom line is there's a discussion in Michigan, prompted in large part by President Trump, who tweeted, liberate Michigan at one point a few months ago. Some people think that's sending a message to these groups that impositions and controls having to do with stopping the spread of coronavirus take away people's civil liberties. The idea that you and I are standing here wearing a mask largely to keep each other safe. I don't see it as a liberty issue, but there are some people who do.
Well, look, this has been a difficult year. And frankly, the Trump administration's failure on coronavirus has made it worse. The fact that we are still, all of us are not able to get the testing we need in every single community. All of us, especially the people of color who've been disproportionately impacted, are still fighting hardest against this virus. But unfortunately, we need to come together sometimes to do difficult things. That's what Michigan has been all about since the inception of our state. And we will always do that. And just because something is hard doesn't mean, rather than taking your ball and going home, they got a gun and went to try to murder somebody. That is not the way we need to respond to the challenges that we face as a people. And I believe, though, that the majority of Michiganders, the majority of Americans want to do the right thing. They're going to buckle down. They're going to work hard. They're going to do what they need to do to protect themselves and their communities. And when we do that, that is how we will get past COVID-19. That is how we will defeat those who have been enabling these kind of terrorists. And that's how we're going to move forward as a society.
Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, thank you for having us here in your hometown. It is a pleasure to be here in Michigan, and we wish you and your fellow legislators stay safe.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to Michigan anytime.
Thank you, sir.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.